I think we can get started. So as everybody can tell, we have a lot of people on this call, so I'm going to ask everybody to just stay muted until the end, and then we can type your questions in chat, and I will ask them to our presenters. So running the meeting this morning is going to be Beverly Drouin. She is a section administrator for the Healthy Homes and Environment section of the Public Division of Public Health Services underneath the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. That's fancy speak for saying that she knows a lot more about this than I do, and that's why she and her team are going to be running this meeting. And Beverly, you can go ahead and take it away. I'm going to mute myself, and I'll be here if anything's needed.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking time to be with us this morning. As Philip said, I'm a section administrator over at the Department of Health and Human Services. I work for the Division of Public Health, and I oversee the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program. I'm here with two of my brightest and best this morning. I'm here with Gail Gettins, who's my health educator, who's going to start us off. And I'm here with Ross Malcolm, who's one of my senior environmentalists, who will be weaving in and out of the presentation. Gail's going to be driving the presentation this morning and kicking this off. As Philip said, we're going to save the answers to the end because we have a lot of material we're going to try to cover.
As Beverly indicated, I work with Beverly and Ross, and I'm a child development specialist by training. And my role today really is to give you just, a few basic facts and background on childhood lead poisoning, lead exposure in New Hampshire, just so you have a little bit of backdrop for the chain understanding, at least the thinking behind the new law that Ross and Beverly are going to be explaining to you. As I mentioned, I want to give you just a few facts. There's a lot of kind of misinformation, archive information that is kind of circulates or otherwise serves as people's knowledge base that I want to make sure we update as we go forward here. So the next slide, please. The first piece that I just wanted to share was that in New Hampshire, while there certainly can be more than one source of lead exposure contributing to a child's elevated blood lead level, meaning contributing to a child what you would all think of as their lead poisoning. But in New Hampshire, children are almost always poisoned by lead dust. So dust and debris generated from old lead paint in their homes, whether that's a rental unit or a standing alone house, owner occupied home. Almost always in New Hampshire, it's the paint. It's the old lead paint in our pre-1978 houses, apartment buildings. Now, water, lead in drinking water is getting a lot of the narrative and a lot of attention, and as it should. We do not want lead in our drinking water. But for the sake of this presentation, please understand that how New Hampshire children are almost always poisoned, or the source of lead they come in contact with is from lead paint and old housing, pre-1978 housing. And this is national data, just again to kind of give you the facts. Nationally, 70% of children who are poisoned by lead, exposed to lead, it's from lead in housing, old lead paint in housing, where drinking water only represents about 15% of children who are exposed to lead. So certainly there has lead in drinking water, but really how our children are poisoned and exposed to lead, it's from the old lead paint in housing. Could everyone please mute, please? We're hearing a background phone call. Next slide, please. The next piece that I just wanted to share is that, I often get the question, is this really that big an issue in New Hampshire? We're a tiny rural state. How bad can this be? Well, it is a really significant issue in New Hampshire. This is just 4 years worth of data between 2019 and 2022, just 4 years. We had over 4,000 children poisoned by lead in New Hampshire, 4,183 to be exact. So just digest that while you're having your coffee and muffin here. Just digest that number. We are a tiny little state. And in 2022 alone, we had over 1,000 children poisoned by lead. These are children that have had a blood test, and the result of the test has been 3.5 or greater. That's a number, a test result. And that's the CDC's blood lead level reference value, indicating a child who's been poisoned by lead at a level at which they should have nurse case management and have an investigation to determine where they're coming in contact with lead in their lives. Now think about that, 4,183 children in our little state in just the last 4 years. Next slide, please. The other kind of, I guess, misconception that I'd like to correct this morning before you learn about the new law is that it takes only trace amounts of lead dust to poison a child. Like if you can picture wetting your finger and sticking it into your sugar bowl and lifting it up, that tiny little bit amount of sugar, those granules on your finger, are sufficient to poison a child and result in an elevated blood lead level. I mean, that's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. So you can have a whole lot of this lead dust all over your floor or stairways where children sit, play, crawl, pull to standing, run their toys, and then they put these items in their mouth. And that's how that little bit of lead dust gets in their body that then wreaks havoc. You know, there kind of seems this misconception that children have to eat paint chips the size of Doritos and binge eat them, and then maybe they'll become exposed to lead. Well, we now know that it's only trace amounts. Really, what you will not see on their hands, toys, floors, and pacifiers that will negatively impact a child, their brain development, and potentially change the trajectory of their life. Next slide, please. So when lead gets into a child's brain, and please understand that children under 6, their brain is not yet protected. It doesn't have the filter that you and I have as adults, but children under the age of 6 have no filter over their brain that keeps out lead. That's why we're so concerned about children under the age of 6. I mean, they have a blood-brain barrier, but it's not functioning sufficiently to keep lead out. It's not mature enough. It hasn't developed sufficiently. So when children come in contact with lead into their body, it goes right through their brain. And when it goes into their brain, in short, it wreaks havoc. It actually kills synapses. It kills parts of a child's brain. When the video clip, the physician that's speaking says 2 points that I always reiterate. Number one, she shows an MRI scan, and she shows that children who've been exposed to lead as young adults, when you look at their brain, there's less brain. There's actually less brain because the lead has negatively impacted its growth and development. Less brain. The second thing that she mentions is that in the Cincinnati lead study, which is the largest international study of its kind that followed children from birth well into adulthood, children who are exposed to lead have a lower IQ. In the Cincinnati lead study, it's 86 in a group of children who are now adults that are healthy, met all their developmental milestones, weren't exposed to lead. It should be about 100. Now, what does that really mean? That's a 14-point deficit. And if you know anything about IQ, that is astronomical. That's the difference between functioning well as an adult, being able to work, live, play independently, and to function well. With an IQ of 86, those things don't happen. You don't function well. You don't function well independently. You're going to need a lot of support to manage your life and your well-being. So the negative impact from lead is what I just discussed. Lower IQ, significant learning disabilities and learning delays. Almost all of the children exposed to lead are in special education services as they enter school and need a tremendous amount of help in extracting an education. They have gross motor deficits. What does that mean? Being able to control their bodies, to engage in physical activities and athletics are very difficult. And finally, most people do not realize with lead exposure comes really significant behavior problems, really tough behavior problems at school and at home. inability to manage emotions, inability to control your behavior, control your anger, aggressive behavior, destructive behaviors, antisocial behaviors. I mean, really tough behavior challenges. All of this lasts right into adulthood. And as you can guess, I put at the top the little $ of the negative impacts on purpose. If you go to the next slide, and this is my last slide, is that there is a huge cost to all of us with lead exposure. And that's what drove some of the legislation that you're going to hear about next. I mean, clearly the impact for the child and the family is life-changing. You know, a family's experience changes once their child is exposed to lead. The child's life and trajectory is going to be dramatically different than what maybe a parent had hoped for or expected. But there are also huge costs to economic burdens, huge costs to our communities, to our towns, to our state, in terms of special education services. I don't know a school district in New Hampshire that's not struggling with their school budget and their special education costs. You know, there's extra medical services, social services, even all the services that our program provides in terms of nurse case management and lead inspections for children who've been exposed to lead. So there is a real economic impact to childhood lead exposure in our state. And again, in 2022 alone, we had over 1,000 children in our tiny state who were poisoned by lead as identified by a blood lead level test. So I'm going to end there. Those are my few facts that I wanted to get out there as just background to kind of lay the foundation. So there's a little bit of understanding as to what went into developing this change in our lead law. It actually was part of legislation that passed in 2018. But this section is now going into effect as of July 1st. So I'll turn it over to my very talented colleagues, Ross and Beverly, to take it from here.
Gail, thank you so much. I can do a lot of things really well, but apparently not driving a PowerPoint presentation this morning, but I'm doing my best, everybody.
Well, you're doing better than I did.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk about this one section of the lead law. The lead law has been around for 20 years. We're going to talk about this new section, the 5D section, sale and rental of property. As Gail said, it was voted into law in 2018, signed by the governor, and it goes into effect July 1st, 2024. And there's two sections of the law, Roman numeral 1, which impacts residential rental units, and Roman numeral 2, which is for newly licensed daycares. So Roman numeral 1, newly constructed rental units within buildings erected prior to 1978 need a lead safe certificate before they can get a certificate of occupancy. Roman numeral number 2, newly licensed daycare facilities within buildings erected prior to 78 need a lead safe certificate before they can become licensed. So what does this mean? So it means there's 3 types of properties that we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about the most obvious: warehouses, mill buildings, Victorians, large New Englanders that were built prior to 78, but that are now being made into residential rental housing. We're going to talk about owner-occupied homes that were single-family homes and are staying single family, but they're now being put on the rental market. I think of that as me. My husband wants to move. We have a single family. He wants me to move to Florida with him, but I'm not ready to sell my house. I'm going to rent it out, but it's an 1840 house. So I would need a lead safe certificate to rent it out. And then pre-78 childcare facilities that are applying for a new license. So what does it not apply to? It does not apply to pre-78 residential rental markets that are residential rental properties that are already in existence. Pre-78 owner-occupied homes, people who own their home and live in their home, and childcare facilities that are already licensed by the Department of Health and Human Services Childcare Licensing Unit. Who are the people who need to know about this law? Well, a lot of people. And we've been working to do presentations with the realtors and the property owners and the health officers and the code officials So you're one segment of the population that we've been working with to help spread the word about this new section of the law. So a lot of people ask us, well, what's a rental, right? So we're deferring to the State Board of Fire Marshal, their fire control, Chapter 153, how they define a rental unit. And basically it's all encompassing. It's everything from a boarding house to a hotel to a motel to Airbnb and VRBOs. So very broad definition of a rental. What are the steps to getting a lead safe certificate? So contractors or any contractor in the United States who's working on a pre-78 property by federal law under the US EPA, under the renovation, repair, and painting law, they need to be certified as a RRP contractor, a renovate, repair, and paint contractor. So any contractor in New Hampshire working on a pre-78 house has to have this certification. That's federal law. That's not state law. So contractor uses lead safe work practices to do whatever they're going to do to remodel, renovate, take this house down to studs, take this warehouse down to studs to do their scope of work. Property owner or the contractor then hires a licensed risk assessor to verify all the lead hazards have been removed. So they're going to do a walkthrough, they're going to do a visual, they're going to bring an XRF, an X-ray fluorescent instrument on site, they're going to do dust wipes, they're going to do soil samples to verify that there are no lead hazards left on sites. If during that walkthrough, they identify lead hazards, then that means that you need to have a licensed lead abatement contractor come in and remove those hazards. You've identified them as lead hazards. The intent is now to remove lead, so you can no longer be RRP certified. You need to have a licensed abatement contractor. The contractor needs to clean the workspace. And when I talk about clean, I'm talking about cleaning within an inch of your life, because you're cleaning something that's invisible. So you clean some more, then you re-clean, and then you clean again. And then the risk assessor comes back and they do a clearance inspection, and they're going to be doing dust wipes to verify that there are no dust hazards on that property. They're going to do a visual, they're going to do dust wipes, they're going to do soil sample, and then the property owner obtains what's called a lead safe certificate. So where do you find a licensed lead inspector risk assessor in the state of New Hampshire? So the risk assessors in New Hampshire are licensed, credentialed professionals. There's only, less than a dozen of them across the state. This is a QR code that will take you directly to our website to where you can find that list. And we'll distribute this PowerPoint presentation after today's meeting so that you can where to find these licensed risk assessors. So Ross is going to help me here talk a little bit about what a certificate of lead safe is. So you're going to hear people call it a certificate of lead safe or a lead safe certificate. So Ross, I'm going to let you talk here about the lead safe certificate.
Okay, so can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was a little worried about that. With the QI code on the previous slide, I did try that a while ago, and I would encourage you guys to try it. Just put your phone on it. It takes you straight to the list for risk assessors. So this certificate of lead safe has a room on top for the company letterhead for the risk assessor. And then the next statement, thank you, says that they hereby certify that the sampling was done in accordance with the regulations. And you'll notice all the check boxes there where it describes all the areas where they were tested. So there's spaces there for lead paint hazards, for dust hazards, and then soil. Next, please. The next section further down says, what kind of inspection was it? Was it a risk assessment, which is initial? So if you hired a risk assessor to come into this property that you're about to do something to, they can tell you where the lead hazards are. They can tell you, if there's dust existing even before people start, which is actually important because it lets you know what you're up against even before you've done any work. And then also whether you're having a clearance inspection there to clear the property and get that certificate. Next. And then down at the bottom, of course, they sign their name, their license number, and they print their name. Next. Okay, so we've thrown around the term lead hazards, and we group it all into one group, but in fact, there are different categories. So you can see the categories here. Even within deteriorated, there are several categories there. Chipping, flaking, peeling, cracked, or chalking or damaged. I don't know if you guys know what chalking is, but if you rub your hand across a painted surface and you've got some on your hand, then it's chalking. Okay. Friction surfaces, walking surfaces, things like that. And impact surfaces, anywhere if you have a door swing open and hit a baseboard, something like that. And then chewable surfaces, it's a very specific definition in New Hampshire. It's got to be a certain height up to 4 feet and project out at least a half an inch for a child to get their mouth on it. Bare soil, we're concerned with areas where there's bare soil because there's high contact. And then there's two different standards. One is for the regular yard, and then there's a more strict standard for children's play areas or perhaps a vegetable garden. Next. Okay, so this is just the title slide for what we're about to see. And these are all pictures that we're just going to buzz through, showing some of the things we've seen on inspections. So this is obviously as bad as it gets. At least I would hope it's as bad as it gets. So as the paint falls off, it has to collect somewhere. This is actually the back stairway of an apartment house, and people are walking up and up through that every day. Of course, those chips are going to get on their shoes and get tracked into their living space. Next, please. Again, just paint that's giving up its adhesion. You can see this everywhere. And next, of course, this is a railing, and this is going to have people's hands on it. Again, not good. And friction surfaces. So if you go to the next slide, just anywhere you can see where the paint's gone from the door, opening and closing, open and closing. And also you can see the impact surfaces on the edges of that door jamb there on the other side. Next, we're going to talk about, yep, this is another friction surface. So this is a painted deck and half the paint's missing. Well, it's gone somewhere. And next. And this is just an old wooden sash. And of course, you can see the paint is flaking on the sash. The paint is not in the best shape on the windowsill. And that window is going to go up and down and hit and rub. Next. Okay, so impact surfaces. They don't call this a kick plate for nothing. So that's pretty much what's caused all this impact damage. Next. Okay, this is a window well, and there's just so much going on wrong here. We have, the weather hits it and it gives up its adhesion. We have a pile of chips there. That's an impact surface, loads of dust. And when the windows are open and the breeze comes in, that dust is on your floor. Next. Chewable surfaces. I mean, this picture really says it all. When a child is at that height and they're looking out the window on their world, they're going to put their mouth on something that just happens to be on the right height. And then the last part we want to talk about is bare soil. And we talked about children's play areas. Obviously, you can have a designed play area where kids are going to play. But then the next one is just an impromptu one that was just, hey, here's some dirt. Let's put our trucks here and let's play. All right. So now I'm going to turn it back to Bev.
Thanks, Ross. Those are great examples of lead hazards that we see all the time. Now, I did want to touch on the Roman numeral 2 part of RSA 138(5)D, sale and rental of property, and this is childcare facilities. So who inspects childcare facilities here in New Hampshire? Well, our municipal health officers, they're required to do an inspection of a licensed childcare facility as part of the licensing process. So the health officers will receive some training. But if you were hired to do renovations, or, to bring a building, if you were hired to bring a building into compliance for a childcare facility, Roman numeral section 2 would apply to this. And it only applies to people who are getting newly licensed. All our childcare facilities across the state who are already licensed by Department of Health and Human Services are exempt from this. So what happens if the contractor or the property owner skipped the initial risk assessment and is now seeking an occupancy permit? So you've started a project back in April, February, whatever. You've been working on it all spring, And now you need to go to your city, town and get your occupancy permit. And you can't do that without a lead safe certificate. So again, like I mentioned, the contractor needs to clean, 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 and clean some more. Lead dust is for the most part invisible. So what Ross showed you, those egregious paint chips, I mean, those are easy to clean up. You can, even an old woman can see those, but what the dust wipes is doing is testing invisible lead dust. So you clean, 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 and then contact a licensed risk assessor to do the clearance. He's going to do a visual, he or she is going to do a visual and take XRF readings. They're going to do dust wipes and they're going to collect soil samples. And they're going to determine if lead hazards exist. And if they find lead hazards, then, you know, you need to start the process all over again. So who's enforcing the new section of the law? So HEP 1600, they're the rules that support RSA 130. They're the state lead rules. Currently, there's nothing in the lead rules about who's enforcing the new section of the law. The HEP 1600 rules has some new, two new proposed fines that are in the works. They're going to public comment right now. One of them is for property owners who fail to obtain a certificate of lead safety. And this should be a $500 fine, for instance, per day. And the second fine is for failure of a newly licensed childcare facility to obtain this certificate. And also, again, a $500 a day fine. So what we've been doing is we've been working with municipalities across the state, the larger cities, to contact people who have building permits out right now, so that when they go for their certificate of occupancy, they're not caught off guard. We've done our best to get word out about this new rule by doing sessions like this today. But I'm sure people have a lot of questions. So we're going to open it up for any kind of questions that people have. And Philip, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the audience. And I don't know if people are chatting, putting questions in the chat, or if it's live, but Ross and Gail and I are all three here available for Q&A.
Perfect. So yeah, we have a bunch of people in here. So just to avoid chaos, I'm going to ask people to put questions in the chat and I'll just read them off for you. I think this one was answered, but Joe Malloy asked, does this apply to short-term rentals? I think you did mention this, but
It does. So
do you need to expand on that at all?
Yep, we're using the state fire marshal's definition of what a rental is, and that is short-term rentals. It's Airbnbs, VRBOs, boarding houses, hotels, motels. And
But again, I think the important part about that is if it was rental before, and if they've done some work on it, it's still rental, then this part of the law doesn't fit in lock and key. And so it's not, that doesn't pertain. But if it is being changed in use to rental, then it becomes important.
so
Okay,
we'll
great.
send out a copy of the slides, which will have the slide in there of the state fire marshal's definition. So you can all look at it.
I'll also have a recording of this meeting if anybody wants it. So after the meeting, I'm going to download it and everything. And if you'd like a copy, I can send that to you as well. Does this mean before listing a home, it has to be lead paint certified?
So if you're asking before listing a home that's pre-78, that was owner occupied and that is now going to rental, it will need a lead safe certificate. Yes.
But if somebody is just selling a home, a single family home, and it's, you know, not rental property, then no, it doesn't apply. It's not all reaching on this. This is just properties that are converted to rental space. And this really goes way back to some mill buildings that had issues years ago. And that's when this law was discussed and put into play. And then it just had a sunset date of 2024. But I wanted to point out one thing that I think might have been misleading because for us it's second nature, but for everybody else it might not be. There's really two ways to go about this. One would be to get a risk assessor right up front, find out where your lead hazards are, and incorporate the work scope into the renovations and changes you want to make. And then you're doing it seamlessly all at one and you're just following the process. The other would be, I know that we showed a slide on that, is properties that have pretty much undergone all these renovations and now they're going, oh, I've got this law. Okay. So they're going to try to make the place look as good as they can and then call a risk assessor and kind of cross their fingers and hope that they've taken care of all the hazards. But if somebody doesn't know what lead hazards are, then it's almost impossible for them to identify them and do the work. So they're going to have a risk assessor come in and tell them, well, you got to do this, this, and this. And so that could be rework.
Thank you, Ross.
Okay. The next question I have is, what is the best way for an owner to get their building that is currently occupied with a current certificate of occupancy to make sure it's lead safe?
So this is a building that's already a residential rental. And the property owner just wants to understand where his lead hazards are so that they can renovate, repair, and paint successfully. He would go to our website, go to that QR code, and find a licensed risk assessor to come in and show them where the hazards are and which hazards he should pay attention to first. So every time he does a unit turnover, he's going to pay attention to the lead hazards that put him and families most at risk.
Okay. Next one I have is there a time where existing rentals will be required to meet these new standards?
No immediate plans. Massachusetts, yes. New Hampshire, no.
Is there a cost for these inspections?
Yes. So a licensed risk assessor is a lead professional, no different than a plumber or your chimney guy, and there is a cost for their services. And the cost would be depending on how large the spaces they're looking at. So you call a risk assessor to look at a mill building that's 102 residential units. That cost is very different than if he's coming to look at a 2,000 square foot 1840 house. It's night and day. So yes, there's a cost.
So Michelle had a question that said, if a property has been a rental for decades in an old town and there's no CO, which I'm assuming is certificate of occupancy, in the town file, what needs to happen? I think it's important to make the differentiation between the actual town's criteria for a certificate of occupancy is vastly different from this. And your first sentence gives it away. If the property has been a rental for decades, it doesn't apply per se to this new law here. This is properties that are just changing into rental status. So it wouldn't apply, although if somebody wanted to make a property lead safe, you can always do that proactively.
Great, thank you, Ross. I didn't realize I skipped over that one on accident. And then Marie asked, will a lead safe certificate be required if an inspector issues a no lead-based substances found?
Can you repeat the question again?
Will a lead safe certificate be required if an inspector issues a no lead-based substances found? I'm assuming.
Okay, so I can't imagine what contractor would ever issue a no lead-based certificate. Like who would in the world would take that liability to say there's no lead? Because there's products on the market today that still have lead. So if somebody was going to certify that there was absolutely no lead and they want to take that risk, that means no building components, no dust, no one's going to take that liability. So you would still need a lead safe certificate.
So I think also there's a differentiation between this no lead-based substances found, which is the kind of inspection that risk assessors do for insurance companies, where they don't take dust wipes. They just, do a casual inspection for the insurance company. There's really no guarantee there of actual lead safety because of the fact that there could be dust. Just because they find no lead substances there doesn't mean that there hadn't been work on or it could have been tracked in or whatever. So if somebody wants to get a certificate of lead safe, it's going to have to pass dust wipes.
Yep, three components, right? So the risk assessor is going to come in and look at building components, windows, doors, ceilings, floors. He or she is going to look at dust wipes, invisible dust you can't see, and then they're going to look at soil outside and surrounding the building. So three things they're going to look at.
And we've got a bit of a complex one there from Natalie.
Yep. So pediatricians can find high lead levels, report this to get an assessment. What can the renter do in this situation?
I'll take that
So,
one if you want.
pediatricians, so all blood lead levels in the state of New Hampshire are reported to the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program, all blood leads, adults, children, babies, everybody. If a child under the age of 6 years old has a blood lead level of 5 micrograms per deciliter or higher, that's a venous blood lead, and the child lives in a rental unit, Department of Health and Human Services is going to come out and do an investigation into that home. And if lead hazards are found, the property owner is going to be put under administrative order to have the lead hazards removed. If they live in an owner-occupied home, we're going to make recommendations to try to help the family understand where the lead hazards are and to remove the lead hazards so that that child's blood lead level can go down. Natalie, does that answer your question? Well,
So I think
I actually worked with a family that this happened to. They moved into a home and she had a small child that the lead level was really high and they came in and inspected.
Yep.
They ended up getting evicted out of this whole process. And as far as I can tell, the place never was remediated for lead, but this was, a couple years ago. And now you have this new law. So at the time, I thought there were funds to help owners to help do this, but at the time they couldn't find anybody to come up. I live all the way up in Coos County, and there's not a lot of people that want to come all the way up here, but we have a lot of lead.
Yeah, you do have a lot of lead. So you touched on a couple things. So it's illegal in the state of New Hampshire to evict a family for a child that has an elevated blood lead. But very often we see once a child has an elevated blood lead, the relationship between the landlord and the family starts to disintegrate. And typically, often we see families withholding rent, and the minute you don't pay your rent, you've broken your lease. So a landlord can evict a family for, non-payment of rent or what have you. We do have HUD funds in the state of New Hampshire typically to help low-income families remove lead hazards from their homes. They're federal funds, and the federal funds come and go. Right now, the state of New Hampshire is in a dry period. We expect to have all our HUD grantees all the funds brought back in by December. But right now, if you're not in the city of Manchester, there are really no federal funds to help you remove lead hazards.
And I just wanted to add that the part about the tenants being evicted, if it had to do with being for cause, then that can be done if there's something in the lease that you're breaking. But there's also, and I guess it's a little bit unfortunate, but there's a provision in our rules that says if the landlord cannot afford to do the work, then they can vacate the building and certify it as vacant, and it just sits there vacant until they can get the funding to do what they're going to do. And the whole point of this is not to be vindicative to the tenants, but it is to prevent others or prevent them from continuing to live with lead hazards until they can figure out what they're going to do to make the property safe. So there's a bit of a financial component in it that if you have a property, 3 units or whatever, sitting vacant, the entire building, you're in compliance with us. However, you're losing income every month. So that tends to be kind of a motivator to get these people, to get them taken care of. So the eviction was kind of a protection measure, but it is unfortunate. As long as they're within the terms of their rent, they can't be evicted for having an elevated blood lead level.
So Philip, I see the next question's about the average cost for risk assessment. I mean, it can go probably 1,500 to thousands and thousands, depending on how large. I mean, like cotton mills down in Manchester, 102 family mill building is very different than a 2,000 square foot home. So it's night and day. We talked about the next one, are funds available? We have HUD funds, but they're in a dry period right now. Kit Lord wants to know if it's up to snuff for RRP work, would it pass? So renovate, repair, and paint is about containing lead dust. So it does not take into account soil samples outside. So are you asking me, Kit, if you cleaned it enough so that it passed the Swiffer test for RRP, is it clean enough to pass the risk assessor dust swipe? I would say probably not. I would say that would be a risk you're taking. And every time that you have the risk assessor come and do dust swipes, you're paying for that. So when I say that you need to clean and then clean some more and then clean some more and then clean some more, I'm really not kidding. You don't want to waste your money and have the risk assessor come and do dust wipes only to find out that you're 3 levels of cleaning short of where you need to be.
Yeah, we have lead abatement contractors out there that have been in the business for many years, but the standards for dust continually get more and more stringent as time goes on. And there isn't a single lead abatement contractor out there that hasn't failed a dust wipe or two here or there because of that. And then when that happens, they have to re-clean and resample.
Yeah, and Kit, when we're talking about cleaning, I mean, it's this HEPA vacuum wet wash, HEPA vacuum wet wash, right? You have to have a HEPA vacuum as part of your toolbox for cleaning. Somebody, Michelle says, can you ask the question you skipped? I'm not sure what that means, Michelle. Kate, so did I hear Beverly say that an RRP contractor can do the work after risk assessment? That isn't seen as practicing. Okay, so Kate, we go around this all the time, right? It's the difference between RRP, EPA, renovate, repair, and paint, and abatement is your intent, right? So if your intent is to take a property and make it residential rental units and it's pre-78, you can use an EPA RRP contractor. You're remodeling, you're renovating, you're doing whatever you're doing, you're bringing it down to studs. They have to be RRP. Once you have brought a risk assessor in and he's identified hazards after you've done all that, then you have to go to abatement contractor. But if your intent is remodeling, you can use an RRP contractor. Kate, does that answer it for you? I mean, it's gray. You know it's gray. Marie?
What if they get a lead inspection, not a risk assessment, to get information before RRP? Or does once you start getting any type of inspection, you kind of go down the abatement path?
No,
That's
I would
my
say
point
I would
too.
say no.
That's-
If you get an inspection and your intent is to remodel, repair, or paint, your intent is to turn that into residential rental units. The inspection is to guide you where the lead components are so that you can use lead safe work practices, which is RRP.
So even after risk assessment, if they feel confident in saying their intent is not full abatement, their intent is just remodeling, it's okay. They're not.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a line I've always asked them not.
Yep,
to
it's a
cross.
very fine line, but that's clearly what I'm saying here.
Thank you.
I mean, if you're going to have windows replaced and you call a window company and they say they're RRP certified, they can change out your windows. But if you have a risk assessment report that says your windows have hazards and you want to replace those windows, it becomes abatement. It's the same action, but it's all about your intent.
Okay, so somebody made a mention about vacating an eviction, which is not really a question. Kate Kirkwood mentioned that the HUD NOFO notification of funding opportunity came out. what that means is New Hampshire has four HUD grantees: City of Nashua, City of Manchester, Sullivan County, and New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority offers HUD funding all across the state of New Hampshire. The HUD funding is for property owners who rent to low-income tenants. So to qualify for the HUD funding, the property owner doesn't need to be low income. The tenants need to be. The property owner can be sitting on a bank account, but the tenants have to be income qualified to qualify for the HUD funding. And so other than the City of Manchester, our 3 HUD funds have been high and dry for several months. And the NOFA just came out, and we anticipate getting funding to all 3 of them again. I'm guessing November, December is what my guess is. Kit mentions, oh wait, Barbara, just the cost of redoing an apartment after a tenant vacates it is pretty expensive. Yes, it is. Turnover is expensive. To add this cost to an owner is prohibitive, and is the only way to overcome this is to hike the rents up again, which affects tenants greatly. So this has nothing to do with the new law. I think with Barbara, what you're saying is if a landlord at unit turnover wants to slowly make the unit lead safe, like at unit turnover, you're painting, you might be tearing out the bathroom, you might be fixing the kitchen. If every time they turned over a unit, they did a little bit of work to make it more lead safe, 3 tenants later, you'd have that place lead safe. But you're right, it costs money to use our RP contractors, and I believe that this should be reflected in the rent, but that's, we're in a housing crisis here in New Hampshire. We all know that. And our job is to not tip the balance too badly.
Well,
Kit
don't forget too
mentions,
that the nature of the question was, if it was rental before, then it's rental now, then it's not being mandated by this. But if you wanted to get to that point, wait until there's some grant money available and go that route.
Kit mentions that she has a HEPA. Yeah, everybody should have a high efficiency vacuum cleaner. They're easy to buy, $300, $400, $500, and you can get yourself a good one. Everybody who's a contractor working on pre-78 housing should have all their people should have this in their toolbox. It's a must. Let's say certificates are not indefinite. Will the rental owners be required to conduct risk assessments to acquire updated certificates every few years? So you are right. Let's talk about lead safe certificates. I'm going to give you my example. So I live in an 1840 Cape. Layers and layers and layers of lead paint in my house, but all of it's covered with a brand new layer of latex, bright white. I like my house bright white. But every time we move a piece of furniture in, we chip. So it might have a lead safe certificate when it's all painted. It might be nice and lead safe. There's no lead hazards. But every time we bring in a piece of furniture or move a chair from room to room, we chip it. And so the certificate of lead safe is only good as long as it's maintained. I have an adult son who's got a size 15 shoe. Every time he goes up the staircase and he bangs the risers and makes those little chips, that certificate of lead safe is gone. Every time one kid slams the door and those little lead chips come out, that certificate of lead safe is gone. There is such a thing as in-place management. In-place management is the responsibility of the tenants and the landlords to walk through that facility with regularity to make sure that there are no lead hazards. The job of the landlord, once you get a lead safe certificate, is to keep it, right? By maintaining the property. You get a certificate of lead safe, and then as you're an absentee landlord and you just go away, just living in that building, that house, you're going to have lead hazards. So your job is to do in-place management. I'm watching the time here, Philip. I didn't realize we only have a couple more minutes.
We can go a few minutes over unless you guys need to.
I have a hard stop. I have a hard
Okay.
stop at 11. My employer has given us lead protection kits with testing kits and other items to help protect the home and reduce lead exposure. Does this really help until they can get more help. I don't know what a lead protection kit is. I don't know what that means.
Well, we got a bunch of things like to clean with, a water filter, a bunch of duct tape to cover over
Yeah.
things, like those kind of things. Yeah, so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those things help. So anytime that you can reduce the exposure to lead hazards, put furniture in front of the window well so the kids can't climb up there, put duct tape over chipped surfaces, take your boots off before you go in the home so you're not dragging those paint chips in from the house, wiping the dog's paws so that they're not bringing soil in from the garden. Those all can help. If an owner wants to do the work, how do they get trained? If they want to become an EPA RRP contractor, Kate Kirkwood's right here in the room. She trains. If you want to become an abatement contractor, we have
Kate
listed
Kirkwood's right here in the room.
right
and
here
she
in
can
the
do the
room.
training.
Yeah. With change of tenant, is certificate required? No. Right? So if it was a rental unit and you're just putting in a new tenant, you do not need a lead safe certificate. If it was never a residential unit before and you're making it a residential unit, then you need to get a lead safe certificate.
But the change of tenants is a great opportunity to get in there and assess the property and do whatever cleaning or repairs you need to do.
So I have a hard stop, and Philip, I want to thank you for inviting us here today.
No, of course.
We'll send out the presentation. We'll send it to you, Philip. You'll send it to your people. And Ross and and Gail's emails are on there if you have additional questions. A million times over, we're sorry for the technical difficulties this morning. We just haven't been on Zoom in a while. They transitioned us to Teams, so I'm not sure what went wrong, but it did
No
go
problem.
wrong.
And then, so I put my email in the chat. If anybody wants a recording of this, they want to go back and listen to any of the questions that were answered, or you want a copy of the presentation, I'll send that to you.
And if anybody
and
asks
then-
a question in the chat that didn't get answered, grab a hold of one of our email addresses and send it to us because we'd like you to have all the answers.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
everybody.
everybody.